So this session is called A Space Odyssey with SolarWinds. I'm Aaron Sackett.
I'm Sadaka Hattori.
And we have recorded our intro, so now we're ready to start. How's everybody doing? Just to kind of get a feel for your guys' interest, experience. How many of you guys are using SolarWinds? How many of you guys are using something else? What is something else?
OpenNMS, LibreNMS, SpiceWorks.
Okay.
Cascade.
Okay, yeah.
We have some of that too.
Okay, so we kind of crowdsourced a theme for this, and we decided that time to take a stress tab integration with 2001 was kind of fun. Watched the movie again the other night and found some cool quotes that really fit in. When you think about the whole thing of a computer kind of taking over your life and threatening your existence, and whether or not you have any control over that, it's kind of fun to think that monitoring might help with that process a little bit. We'll see if that's actually the truth.
So this is kind of what we're going to go over today. I'm going to let you know a little bit about us. We're with Cascade Technology Alliance. And then just the modules that we have and our experiences, and we'll kind of go over some pros and cons at the end. So first of all, Cascade Technology Alliance, if you guys don't know who we are actually 4 different ESDs that have kind of banded together. So Northwest Regional, Multnomah, Willamette, and Columbia Gorge. Although for the sake of this conversation, Columbia Gorge is our silent partner. We're not really working with them on this particular project, but they are part of CTA as a whole. And so our design is a little bit unique in the aspect of we have 3 different data centers, one in Salem, one in Portland, and one in Hillsboro. And in each of those data centers, we have our shared hosting staff, we have the SIS system, we have data warehouse, we have finance, and they're all housed at the different ESDs. And then beyond that, each ESD has their own districts. So we do a lot of monitoring for our districts, I think really heavily at CTA West, which is Northwest Regional. And then we do some basic monitoring at North, and then at South, we're actually getting more into monitoring our customer stuff. So it's interesting. It's kind of an interesting layout, and it's added to the complexity of the project, really. As far as technologies, we have most of your standard technologies, VMware, Microsoft, CentOS, et cetera. We do have some custom things that we've done that required us to do some custom templates within SolarWinds, and we'll go over that a little bit later. But for the majority of our stuff is pretty industry standard. So we went through a very extensive, almost a year-long process before we decided on SolarWinds. We compared Nagios, the paid version, What's Up Gold, CA, and SolarWinds, and we actually treated this entire process like it was an RFP without actually going out for an RFP. So we came up with our requirements. We met with these companies quite a few times. We did a few demos, and we scored them. And SolarWinds is the one that came out on top. CA, to my surprise, actually, I went into that a little pessimistic, and they were a close second. And I'll tell you, there are some days that I kind of wish we'd gone that way, but I'm sure that has its own set of problems as well. So it was it was literally a year-long process before we decided on this particular product. So SolarWinds, Network Performance Monitor, NPM, that's the core product. It used to be called Orion. You get your basic monitoring, your stats, your memory, your CPU, and that kind of thing. But what it doesn't do is any kind of application performance or anything of that nature. That is a separate module that they have. So it's very helpful. You can do network interfaces as well with NPM. And for a lot of people, that is probably a sufficient module or product for your monitoring environment. For us, we have quite a few more modules. So we'll go over some of the things that we're doing with the NPM and kind of step through. I'll hand you off to Aaron.
So in this presentation, we're going to kind of do a mix of introduction of some basic stuff, which is what this piece will be, going through the discovery process, and just kind of, here's the wizard, here's what it looks like, here's the things to think about. For those of you who are already using it, it'll be really familiar. There'll be some other stuff that's much more in depth, and that you'll see some of the custom stuff we're doing. So just starting off, when you're going in and saying, hey, I want to pull in the important stuff, and I want to see what's there, it does a pretty good job of walking you through if you're unfamiliar with it, and says, hey, just, what do you want to grab? What do you want to analyze? And gives you the options of scanning a range, adding stuff that's outside of that range, pulling in Active Directory accounts, and you want to be selective with that. You don't want to be grabbing everything. It puts up some real nice notes for you there. Says, okay, be sure that you understand how this is set up. It will continue to, as you set the discovery, we'll look at that in a minute, for how often it's running that. It'll say, hey, I will continue to look and automatically pull in child OUs that come in under the ones that you select. So here we just decided to grab domain controllers and servers. And just in case you didn't select everything there, it says import servers only, because you don't want all your workstations in there. You can go through and put in virtualization credentials for whatever you're using, and it'll analyze that and grab those stats. SNMP, put in your credentials there. The credential bank is pretty interesting because it is per module. So Network Performance Manager is a module. Then there's SAM, which we'll get to later. Different credentials, ICMP, different credentials. So that's something that maybe they could improve later. But so we use Gaston School District as an example for this. And so you name their credential and use that for everything that's going to be within that module. It has an automatic mode for setting up what monitors you want to assign to whatever it discovers. Depending on your licensing, which Sadako will go into a lot more later, that could really negatively impact how many licenses you have left after it automatically grabs those. So we set it to manually set up monitoring after the discovery is done. And then this is where you're actually naming the discovery. And so it'll auto fill a name in there with date, time, and some other fun stuff. But it's a lot easier to read if you just give it its own name. Decide how often you want it to do that discovery. We just said rerun it daily. And with how that was set up, just in my trial here, we only grabbed 5. And those 5 were 2 servers and an iDRAC and 2 printers, which I wasn't too excited about. So there'll be some stuff that you want to kick out of there after you get that going. And then we went through and took out some of the interfaces that we didn't want, because that's how we're licensed right now. We'll go into that again. And so you'll see 0 interfaces there. And then here you'll see on the notifications that it's got 136 new nodes found and 275 changed. So it's kind of nice to see that and get a summary of that, to be, remind yourself to go back in and see what's changed on a regular basis, as you have, depending on your setup, different discoveries for different parts of your network.
So I should mention on the discovery, one of the things at one of our sites, I decided, okay, well, we have these TV LANs, we have Active Directory. I'm going to add that into the discovery. Oh, these are the SNMP, these are the Windows credentials, and there was a couple different domains within those. And then I sat there for 3 hours while the discovery is going. So you really want to kind of tune that because what happens is it's going to try an IP address, and then it's going to say, okay, let's try SNMP. That didn't work. Okay, let's try this string in SNMP. Okay, that didn't work. Now let's go to WMI. So you really want to kind of target what you're discovering there. And another note on the whether to automatically or manually put that in, we don't necessarily want it to automatically assign all of our templates. Yes, it could have SQL on the box, like say Sophos, for example, but I don't really care about monitoring that. I don't care about the application performance piece of that. So we manually do that instead of letting it automatically do it. And my coworkers thank me because it cuts down on the amount of email alerts that they get, which I've email bombed them quite a few times. So. So the polling engines are, the main servers that actually go out and get the information, and they have agent or agentless monitoring. The agent works with Windows and Linux. We run pretty much exclusively CentOS as far as Linux. And then you can also do agentless, which is SNMP, all versions, and WMI. There's some pros and cons to WMI. You get a lot of great information back on the Windows servers, but it's very memory and sometimes CPU intensive. So if you can switch over to agent, that's typically what you want to do. However, there are some drawbacks to that, and we'll go over that a little bit when we talk about the server and application monitoring piece. The pollers. So out of the box, SolarWinds has a lot of different pollers, and that is ways to measure CPU, memory, just get various information back based off a device type. So Cisco has a set of pollers, or Juniper has a set of pollers, or Dell for that matter. If you can't find it out of the box, it doesn't automatically assign it. They have what's called THWAC, which is their user group, and there's a content exchange. Some of that's actually built right into the application, and some of it you can just go onto the website and do a search for. The majority of our stuff was already covered, but there was some, like we have a Citrix NetScaler, and somebody had written different pollers for that. So we went and grabbed that to apply to our stuff to get memory and connection statistics back. And if all else fails, they have what's called the Universal Device Poller, and you can create your own using SNMP. So you just need to know the SNMP information. You can do an SNMP walk, which gets you a lot of great information and no idea what that actually is. So you can go to the manufacturer's website. We've had to do that for like our UPSs. We have Staco UPSs. There is nothing like that in the content exchange, so we wrote our own pollers for that. And this kind of gives you an idea. So I put in the OIDs based off of what I found on the manufacturer's definition and created my own. So in this case, there's quite a few, and there's quite a few pollers that are assigned to a node. So one for each OID. So we care about, in this example, the battery status. So we're getting that information back. And then we're choosing here to keep the historical data. You may not want to do that, obviously, the more historical data that you keep, the bigger your database gets. But in this case, I really want to know historically how the battery's been doing. And then you name it, create it, and then assign it. So these are all the things that I've created for specific to that Staco UPS. And then you can choose where to display it. So in this case, I've chosen for the battery status a gauge, and I'm going to put it in the node details on the vital stats. And when that's all said and done, when you go into the website, you can see I have my battery gauge, and the battery's at normal. Later on, you can set up alerts based off of that, so that if it changes, you'll get a notification. It's a good indicator. This is a good indicator in this specific one. If we've been running on battery for a long time. And you can see too that I'm able to pull the estimated minutes remaining. It's not necessarily the prettiest gauge, but for what we need it for, it works. You can also create groups for your nodes in SolarWinds. You can do dynamic or static. We have a few dynamic groups that are based off of subnet for our clients. And then we have some static groups, and I'll probably be switching those over later. Groups are great because it allows you to apply templates directly to the group, and then anything in that group will get that template. And it's also how you set up dependencies, your parent-child relationships, so that theoretically, if the parent goes down, you're not going to get notified on the children. And if somebody has that working right, can you let me know? Because it doesn't seem to work right. I need to open a case on that one. And the other thing you can do with groups is you can limit views so that people logging in can only see what's in that group. There's actually a couple different ways to do that. Another way you can do that is through custom fields. And I think that that's one of the greatest parts about SolarWinds is the custom fields. So there's quite a few things you can do with that. It's pretty powerful in that aspect. And you can use that information with the tool that they provide with NPM called the Account Limitation Builder, which I'll show you in a minute, which again feeds back into the views. So this is your custom fields, and I think it's funny. I've created some of these, and some of these custom fields are out-of-the-box custom fields. So things like PO number, purchase date, so you can track your asset information. One that I created is development, and that's yes or no. And the reason I created that is because when I'm doing alerting, I don't want email alerts when it comes to development machines. I don't care about those. Now I need the information and I want it logged, but I don't want to get emailed on that. So I actually specify that in my alerts that if development is set to yes, then log it, but don't email us. Email is another one that I set up, and the reason I did that is I've attached that to both a node and an interface, and then I can put the group that's responsible in there, and then they're included. I've added that into the alerts as well to email anybody in that field with the email alerts as well, and that way I'm not hard-coding information within the alert itself. Gives it a little bit more flexibility. I don't have to remember to go in to tell that group. I just attach it to that node. This is the account limitation builder, and I think this is great for our customers. I don't know your guys' situation. There's a couple reasons I like this. I come from a managed services background, so limiting views was really important in my previous life, so that customer can only see that stuff. That's not as important at the ESE, but I think it's really helpful in the aspect that when you log in, you're only seeing your group of stuff. You're not overwhelmed with the hundreds of nodes that we have in there. It's easy to find because all your stuff is displayed right off. So in this particular instance, I have a custom field called district. And then I'm actually limiting that. I'm creating a new view. And in this, I'm using Neoconi in this one. I'm limiting that they can only see anything that's tagged with Neoconi, so that when he logs in, all he's seeing is his own stuff. The other way to do that is to use groups. I do this for the sys team. I'm kind of playing with different ways of doing this. So in this particular one, I'm saying they can only see stuff in the sys group, and then when they log in, this is what it looks. This is their homepage to them. So they see their groups, their stuff, and when I log in comparison, I see everybody and all their things. Again, it's not important as far as we're not worried about them seeing the other information. We're just really just want to make it easier for our teams when they log in. They can see the stuff that pertains to them. And we'll go over the NetworkAtlas.
So the NetworkAtlas is part of NPM, And basically it's giving you an opportunity to do an overlay of some sort of a picture, usually a map of your network, so that you've got a data layer that can be a live data layer over the top of map, so that you can easily see. In this example, we'll go through a heat map and see how that works. But you can see from there, they'll also do floor plans and rack diagrams and other things like that, so that you have a quick visual for somebody's dashboard of how things are doing. So one of the great things about it is that if you have Cisco wireless, it works. If you don't have Cisco wireless, it does not work for you yet. So it's very limited as far as that goes. This is what the interface looks like when you're building it. And you've got, this assumes that you've already gone through and scanned, discovered, imported the wireless controller, and that's already part of your system. And then it's going to be available for this. You've got your APs, they're on the left, and the map that you put in on the right. And so the basic setup is that you just kind of put that background image in. You get that set how you want it. I just used a Google Map image for that. When you have a building that's got multiple floors, you can do child maps off of that. I didn't go that far for the demo or anything like that, but it doesn't, from what I've seen, it doesn't have the ability to say this is floor 1, floor 2, basement, anything like that. You do separate maps for that and then click through to see that. But you get your background image in, you set the scale, and you don't remember the scale, so you have to go out and walk it off and figure out what the scale is, and then come back and put the scale in. Then you drop your access points where you want them, and then you generate the map. And the map does a good job of giving you what it's seeing there, but you can really improve it by showing the connected wireless clients on it, and then you can add those clients back in, and it will analyze those and give you some better readings on your heat map based on what it's seeing from those clients. And all errors are not computer, they're only human errors.
I think those wireless heat maps are especially useful when you're speccing out new equipment or going out for E-rate or whatnot, just to give you an idea of what's needed. That particular time, I think we had 20 clients.
Yeah. Superintendents really like pictures too.
Yeah, that's true. Are there any questions about the NPM piece? So we'll move into SAM. SAM is the server and application monitor, and this is specifically really what drove us to SolarWinds or to look for a new product, because we have some applications. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, where the service is running, but the application isn't actually performing, and so we're really kind of looking into that to get a better idea of what's going on before our customers start noticing, specifically systems like our SIS system or our financial HR system. Those are very important. We got to keep those running, and they have to be performing well. So we'll kind of go over the licensing. I think this is, we'll talk about this later. One of the cons about SolarWinds is that they're really good about nickel and diming you. So at one of our locations, we purchased like a 2,500 monitor pack for SAM, which sounds like a lot, and I'll show you why it's not once we get into this. And then we'll go into the templates a little bit. Probably not going to go into this too much, just gives you an idea. We have the App Insight templates, and those are available for IIS, for Exchange, and for SQL, Microsoft SQL. And it gives you really great statistics, .NET, cache, all that stuff. SQL as well, and I can show you this. We actually have a demo box that we're going to go through a little bit later. It gives you great information, and I think also this is really good when you're going to spec out new equipment as well, to kind of get an idea of how your hardware is performing. I think my favorite part of this is the expensive queries. kind of things that we could possibly tweak depending on what the application is, to make that perform better for our customers. And then we have the Exchange one, and this is my favorite, I think, of anything, because here we go into the Exchange and we can see who's using the most space. At one of our locations, we run like a shared environment for Exchange, so we have multiple districts on that Exchange box. So this is a good thing to who's taking up the most space. It also has another one about, I don't know if I put it in here, I didn't, about sent mail, which is good during phishing attacks. Kind of see who's been infected. It's a really good indicator when you have a problem. So this is just kind of some of the stuff that you get back, the latency and the queues and whatnot. You get a lot of great information. And I should stop and say, when it comes to alerting, I've turned off the majority of these alerts for the application. We log it all, but I don't necessarily email, because a lot of this stuff, there's not a whole lot we can do about it to fix the performance anyway. And this right here, we'll kind of go in. This is a DHCP server one. And this right here is why I say 2,500 monitor pack for SAM sounds like a lot, but it's not. So each template has, each application has multiple components to it. So a component is each item that you're monitoring. So in this particular one, which is one I tweaked, it's a DHCP server monitor. And you can see there's 22 license components in that, and we have that template applied to 12 servers. So 12 times 22. So right there, using 200 and something of your licenses, and that adds up really quick. That's probably one of the smaller ones, actually. So this gives you an idea on the DHCP, all the things that we're monitoring for. So we're looking at a lot of performance counters as well as event log entries, to identify different possible contention points. But it is good at figuring out problems. So there's that. So as far as alerting goes, there is a lot of different vendors have different approaches when it comes to alerting. I worked with one who had the philosophy of turn everything on and then let the customer turn off the ones they don't want. I've had other ones where the philosophy is just the opposite, keep most things off and then turn on the ones you want. SolarWinds out of the box is very, very chatty. You can probably ask my coworkers, they hated me for a while at the amount of emails that they were receiving, and Lana's shaking her head. So you really have to tune that. Most of the application performance monitors, I don't bother alerting on anymore. I log it all, I don't alert, because again, there's not a whole lot we can do. We get SQL, fragmented indexes. It happens. We re-index, and then the next day we get the alerts again. So it's not something that we're going to do necessarily on a daily basis. And my philosophy is, if you aren't going to do anything about it, then there's no point in emailing about it, because what's going to happen, and when you start emailing too much, is people are just going to create rules to move those to different folders or not pay attention when they come in. And so the email should be really tuned to what you care about. Otherwise, they're going to get ignored.
Let's ask something about that a little bit. So about that, those of you who are using a monitoring system right now, how do you balance the number of emails that you get on stuff and what to pay attention to and not to? Do you have everything coming into your inbox? Do you have rules that it's just going to an alerts folder? Okay, and are you reading that regularly? Is it?
Yeah.
So does the monitoring email help?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay.
Sometimes you start looking at it and going, why? I'm getting this all the time. I should just go turn it off. You start tuning those out.
High response time is something that I've actually turned off. We were doing it, so out of the box, SolarWinds uses SNMP. It's for response time, and we were getting wildly inconsistent and just plain wrong information. Switched it to ICMP, still getting a lot of alerts, and it came down to the fact, what are we going to do about this? For one, I don't believe it. I'm actually on the monitoring box pinging this, it's fine. And for two, 10 o'clock at night, is that something that I'm going to care about? No, there's nobody there. So that's one example of something that we actually turned off. Packet loss, we have that on. That's a good indicator, but also I found that packet loss and the high response time kind of battled each other. So when we got, packet loss one, then we're getting high response time. And anyway, those got turned off because they were just filling our inbox with stuff that we didn't need. So actually the majority of what came with SolarWinds turned on, I've actually turned off. What we're really emailing about now is when services go down, some of our custom things like our backups, I'm pulling information in and then emailing out on those on a daily basis, and reboots, things like that. But I'm not actually doing a lot of the actual emails for the applications themselves. So these are all the different things that you can actually do when an alert's triggered. And I know it's probably hard to see in the back. I mean, it's anything from send an email to send a message to log it to either the Windows event log or the SolarWinds event log, to rebooting a server. And frankly, I'm not brave enough to try the rebooting a server or fail over the cluster. Those are not things that I really trust the application to do. I have been inclined to turn on the restart a service one, but I haven't done it yet. We have one of our applications has some custom services that are extremely sensitive, I suppose, and they go down all the time. And so that has been one that we're thinking about turning on. If we can get that team to put that node in maintenance mode when they're actually manually working on it, that's their only concern, is that they're going to try to manually stop it, it'll start it again. So we haven't actually done that, but I think we're going to head in that direction on some of our apps. And before we do that, just kind of go over to the So on the alerts themselves, sometimes I feel like this is a game. This is a demo box, so by default, like half this stuff is turned on. So just pick one of these. So on the trigger actions, you want to get really specific, I think, here. This is where I go in for things like the development, where I say if development equals yes, or the development has to not equal yes, and then it won't email me on that, or it'll only email on the prod stuff, rather. So you want to get really specific here. Exclude things that some of our DHCP monitors, I've excluded VLANs for, it's a DHCP pool that has 15 IPs. I don't really care when it's 80% full. It's a server thing anyway. So this is something you want to play with. At the end, there's a test button, and I really suggest that you simulate the test, because if there's something wrong, all of a sudden you're not getting emails, and when something critical happens, that's not a good time to figure that out. And then the reset, the default is to reset it when the trigger is no longer true. And then the time of day, I think this is really important, and I think this is something that should be defined probably before you choose a monitoring product. But at my last position, we sat down and we decided what services are 24/7 and which services are between these hours and which services are between these hours. And we actually just set time of day alerts for those things. It was also a school district. We decided that, if one of the high school servers, that's a very important server, but if it goes down at 2 a.m., nobody's going to drive to the district office, get the key, and go out there and fix it at 2 a.m. So tell me at 5 a.m., because that's going to give me enough time to get the key and go to school and fix it. Whereas other systems like payroll, HR, those had to be on 24/7, so we alerted on those. So I think this is a really important thing to define, is what do we care about and when, and that's really also going to help cut down on the alerts that you see too. We also use the packet loss one. I'm not alerting on packet loss in the middle of the night because nobody's going to get up and do anything about it anyway. And then triggered actions, and that was kind of that other screen that I just showed you of your different options. Most of these are either going to be send an email or log it. And this is also the fun part because you get to use their variables, which is just basically where to pull this information from the database. And the funny part about this is depending on what you're alerting on, so I have that email, custom property. Depending on what kind of alert it is, that's actually pulled from a different place in the database. So you always want to use the insert variable and find that one rather than copy and paste what you think is true, because it might actually be in a different location than you think it is. And if you put in the wrong information, it just fails and doesn't do anything. So definitely, I think the alerting is the biggest piece of this, and it is definitely a game. It's just you have to get it tuned right. You have to find what's right for your organization, and you have to define what you care about and when you care about it. So the virtualization manager is the module that we purchased. There's also another one that we're going to go over in a few minutes. This is actually a totally separate module from anything else, and it requires, it's an appliance that you put on your VMware or Hyper-V infrastructure. It gets a lot of great information. My previous boss really liked it for the capacity planning piece, although he also thought that we should run our VM hosts as close to 100% CPU as possible. But it does have great information for capacity planning. It does give you VM sizing information, and it does have some remediation options as well, and gives you recommendations. I don't know if I said that. So this is kind of the admin view. I know it's hard to read here, but it tells you the VMs with over-allocated CPU. That's great information to have, because if you're familiar with how VMware works, you can actually negatively affect the performance of your VM if you have too much CPU. It chews up the clock cycles, and it can actually slow it down. So you want to try to have that sized as close as possible. The other one that I liked a lot prior to us purchasing Veeam is the old snapshots. That's something that you want to keep clear. I don't know if you've ever had too many snapshots before, but you can actually crater your VM by having too many, again, negatively, or slow it down, negatively affect your performance. So I think that that's a great overview of your infrastructure, and it can really help you tune these VMs to work like they're supposed to, and get the most out of your hosts as well. This one is also, clearly we have some work to do. Over allocated VPN or a CPU. And this is the manager view. Kind of shows you trends as well, and your breakdown of the OSs and whatnot. So SolarWinds, that is a separate module. That is purchased separately, and that is actually licensed based off of the procs in your hosts. Then you also have the integrated virtual infrastructure monitor, and this actually comes with NPM and SAM. There's no extra module. If you bought SAM, you've already purchased this. It's not as robust as vMan, but depending on what your organization is doing, it's probably sufficient. To be honest, we're probably dropping the license for vMan, and we're going to just switch back to this. It does still do the monitoring that we care about, and it's included. So it gives you just a holistic view of VMware. It has more information than this. Wish I could bring it up on my demo, but I can't monitor that. So it doesn't give you the recommendations and the remediation options, but still we can see the host view, we can see VM views, and we can see that that host needs more memory. Another module that we purchased is the IP address management, and I don't know what everybody's using for that. We came from ICPEnw, and we had an instance running at all 3 of our data centers. And part of the reason that we did that is because with our customers, we have over in subnets, and ICPEnw doesn't really allow for that. That's one of the benefits of the IPAM with SolarWinds, is that you can do overlapping subnets, so we can actually combine our 3 instances and look in one place. It does automated IP management, so we can actually hook it into multiple DHCP servers, DNS servers, and we can actually make changes here and push those out DNS. We're not using that. We have other means of doing that, but that is a possible. We also get IP alerting, troubleshooting, and reporting, and it's kind of helped us so far. We had one customer that's been having some DHCP problems. One of the things I noticed in here is it looks like we're having IP conflicts. So that kind of explains those problems. And you can also delegate administration, which is important for us because our customers, while we maintain some of the data, they might go in and make some changes, and then they can update their stuff as well. We deal with a lot of IPs, so this is kind of an example of what it looks like that I grabbed off their website. So you can mark things as used. And again, so we can hook into DHCP, and it'll pull DHCP every X number of hours. I think I'm doing 4 right now. And it'll just give you an idea of how many IPs are used in that space. And that's the DHCP servers pulled in, and then it shows you the conflicts. Again, really great for troubleshooting problems. One of the great things about SolarWinds is they do have a really healthy user community. So they're on their website, Thwack. I don't know if anybody, the ones that have it, have been there. There's a lot of information. It's forums, blogs, labs, which is helpful. And the content exchange, I think, is the biggest thing. We had a few templates. We've been running Veeam, and they had an older template on there. We were actually able to download it, change it so that it works with the newer versions of Veeam, and then upload it back. And I've already seen that multiple people have downloaded that. So it's really great. The majority of the stuff that I've done that's, quote, custom, I'm actually taking off of this website and then tweaking it for our environment. They have a lot of good webinars. I prefer them when they're recorded so I can skip around to the stuff I care about. But there's a lot of data out there. And they also have a lot of user groups, but the closest one is Seattle. I know some of you are from Washington, which is a little far for a user group for me. And then they have their success center is what they call it, which is basically their knowledge base. So that's kind of our implementation. Are there any questions? Yeah.
On your alerting, do you guys do any text, SMS stuff, or do you look at that?
We do not. Actually, though, that's a great question, and we probably should, especially when we're dealing with like power failures and whatnot. But we also, I've actually been thinking we could monitor each other based off, because I have 3 separate polling engines, and we actually might be changing that design. But our initial requirements were, the reason we went with 3 is we needed, if the link went down between one site, we still needed alerts for the things that are on that site, and the only way to accomplish that was separate instances. But that was, over a year ago, and now we're dealing with dark fiber. We have multiple paths, so that's not an issue anymore. But yeah, we probably should be doing the tech stuff.
The polling engines are 3 different physical sites?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah. So typically what you would do in that case is you would have one main polling engine and then remote pollers. It's, by the way, a lot cheaper that way. But again, if the link goes down between the remote poller and the main poller, then you're not going to get alerts for anything at that site, and it'll queue it up for, like, I think they said an hour worth of data. And then, so if that doesn't come back up within an hour, then you're not going to get those alerts at all, which is why we went with the separate pollers. But yep.
What's your experience with the SolarWinds support? How fast, how responsive they are?
Don't do tickets online if you want immediate support. They'll get to it within 48 hours if you turn it in online. And I think it's like anything else. It's very hit and miss. It depends on what technician you get. I've had some that it's been very frustrating, and I've had some that were fantastic. The last time I had to call, it was a great experience. 2 times ago, I was not such a great experience. So, but I think you get that when you call support for anything. They've always been able to resolve the issue, though. So.
What's the refresh time of the folder, or at least the refresh time that you're using on SolarWinds?
For pulling data,
yeah.
As far as pulling,
Yeah.
we're doing 10 minutes. So we do 10 minutes. The default is 10 minutes. It pulls the device every 10 minutes, and then if there's an alert triggered, it reevaluates every minute.
Is there a way that you can customize that?
Yes, that's all customizable.
30 seconds, for example?
Yes, that's all customizable.
Is there any way that you can, instead of doing what you did manually for the UPS of that stack or whatever brand you put in place over there, is there any way that you can import a specific vendor MIP an entire folder into SolarWinds and then restart the service and see if the SolarWinds have that capability? Because there are some other systems that has that. Either you import it or either you copy that specific MIP folder into program files or whatever, and then you restart the service, and they are able to read the entire vendor MIP folder and gets all the OID from there, and then after that give you a human readable, instead of giving you, I don't know, an alerts with the specific OID, which if you see that big number you won't understand. It gives you the human readable. At least you will see, oh, is this, is that.
So they have a MIB database that they update semi-frequently. The answer is not really. But what you can do is you can actually email them and request that information be added to the MIB database, and they will get to it when they get to it. And the MIB database is something that you want to, well, you don't have to, but you can read. I think I've updated ours after install a while ago. So you can constantly download it because they are updating it all the time. So if they include that information, then yeah, it'll be there, all right there for you. But you do have to request that from them. Otherwise, you have to use the universal device puller.
Is there any way on the alert team that you can put, I don't know, a customized alert for this specific OID?
Yes.
And then just get exactly that alert for that specific OID?
Yeah, and you can put anything you want into that email or log message.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting how that one works, and it's not the prettiest, but if you can just get the information you're looking for within the trigger action, then you can format the email any way you want, and you would just make it specific for that particular OID, so that you would be aware of what it was when the email alert came to you.
Since you compare that software, let's say, to Nagios, and Nagios, a lot of people use it for ups and downs as well. Are you using most of the ups and downs for this specific software using SNMP instead of ICMP?
We're using, well, ups and downs, it depends on the device that we're monitoring. So the majority of how we're monitoring is actually agent. The only thing on the ICMP we're using is for response time. And again, oh, I forgot to mention this. The agent uses less memory. So in most cases, you're going to want to use the agent when you're monitoring Windows versus WMI. With that being said, some of the application templates require that you do it in WMI. So if you're monitoring your Exchange server and you want the App Insight template applied to that Exchange server, then you have to switch the polling over to WMI. Otherwise, it just won't work, and you won't get any kind of intuitive error message. It just won't work. So it's kind of, I had to open a case over that one because I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. So they push you, use the agent, but in some cases you can't use the agent. So. Yeah.
So I'm kind of in the starting phases of evaluating SolarWinds. I've got the 30-day trial, and I've been playing with it a bit. One thing that I've been using previously is Cacti with the PHP weather map plugin. Lynn Benton Lincoln ESD used to use it years ago when it was simple but easy. You know, you get a mouse over and a graphical view of where all of your network links are, what sort of bandwidth you've got, and stuff like that. That was something that we got really used to having, just at a glance looking and saying, oh, that one's red, maybe I should look at those and see what's pulling so much traffic on these various network links. Because of that, in SolarWinds, they've got the Atlas network map, which we're trying to replicate some of that, and it seems like a very valuable feature. I've got the Atlas agent installed on my machine, and I connect to SolarWinds, and I can, you know, add devices to it and stuff like that, and say save and upload or whatever. And sometimes it updates the map, and sometimes I have to completely blow away the map on the server and recreate it. Have you experienced that too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I haven't done a whole lot of work in the NetworkAtlas because it takes a lot of patience. And I don't like doing Visio diagrams that much, and I really don't like the Atlas, but I have played around with it, and there are some quirks. What version are you running?
Whatever the latest was.
So they released 12.1 not that long ago, and I noticed that there was hotfixes for the NetworkAtlas, and I honestly haven't played with it since I've applied the last hotfix. So you might want to make sure that you're up to date and have the hotfix applied, because I know there was some fixes in that.
Yeah, I don't think they let me download hotfixes on a trial account.
No,
That's the problem.
that may be.
Okay, thank you.
So actually, let's go back for pros and cons really quick. I think my biggest complaint about SolarWinds is the pricing, because they do nickel and dime you. And in 2 of our locations, we're actually running unlimited, which in our environment I think is really necessary because we are monitoring so many things. If we were just a district, we'd probably kind of tune that a little bit better. The interfaces one is one that I was a little frustrated with, because when I think interfaces, I think network equipment. So I think, okay, we're going to monitor this for that district, and that's how we quoted it is, you know, we think we're going to do 5 per switch, we have X number of switches. What I didn't take into consideration is that if I'm monitoring my server NICs, that's also an interface. It's just not what I think about. And so that was a little bit frustrating because now I can only monitor certain, I have to pick and choose because for the interfaces, we bought a 250 pack. So now I have to pick and choose what I'm gonna monitor. And so I'm doing basic, the iSCSI, we really care about our iSCSI. But I would like to monitor more of the vSwitches and stuff, but I can't because I limited myself with that. And so that's one of my big frustrations. And I think that there are some just quirks with it, with this application. And SolarWinds has been around, Orion's been around for a really long time. So some of this is really frustrating to me. Like, you've had decades to figure this out. Why is this still happening?
Josh, what was when you installed the agent, it unlinked some DLL or something?
Yeah, that had to do with, that was specific to SCCM, right?
Yeah, well, it was a
It was a .NET thing.
It was like a .NET library, like our config manager client was on the machine, we installed the agent, and then it had unregistered
A DLL.
Yeah, DLL. And he went and reinstalled the
whatever application it was, and it worked fine. But yeah, that was that hasn't happened in a while, and it was on a set of servers that you really didn't want to be installing stuff in the middle of the day, so that was a little bit frustrating and weird. But that hasn't happened in a while, although I don't know that I've deployed the agent to production in a while either. So again, they're just some quirks sometimes. the alerting thing and having to do standalone pollers if links go down is really frustrating to me, because I think about SolarWinds, it's a huge company, and it's got a lot of, I mean, Nike's one of their customers, just global deployments. So some of the things that I'm like, why can't it do this? Like, how do your global customers deal with this? So, any other questions?
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming.